Greetings and welcome. My name is Ryan O'Rourke and today we are going to talk about gesture drawing. Now I'd like to begin by simply asking, what is it? What is gesture drawing? Now the definition certainly changes from artist to artist, however there are definitely some commonalities amongst them. And I think these simply include it is a very quick form of drawing using a very minimal amount of lines, which is used to infer a motion, a form of action, a rhythm. All of these things that ensure that your drawing isn't stagnant. So now that we know what it is, let's talk about why we use it. What are its benefits? Now, there are three main benefits that I can see, and the first being, again, is that it's very dynamic. It adds a rhythm to your piece. It ensures that it is not stagnant. And generally, when we draw people, we can draw them with very flat hips, very flat shoulders, and our subjects, they aren't actually that flat. However, our mind, it kind of simplifies it for us, and the gesture drawing ensures that we're keeping all of those really interesting rhythms within the body on the page, because that is all that we're studying in this initial portion, and then we build everything on top of it. It gives us that very flowing foundation that creates very interesting portraits. Secondly, it can be done extremely quickly. So perhaps you're passing by something or you have to go somewhere, but you really want to get the gesture and the idea of something so you can finish it later. Doing this, it gives us an opportunity to really capture something quickly and add on to it at a later time. So it's just ensuring that if you're really inspired by something, you can get it down and work on it when you actually have time to. Finally, gesture drawing ensures that you can do a lot of work in a very minimal amount of time. We learn by doing, and if you were to spend 10 hours on every drawing you did, you'd only learn the initial form and rhythm once every 10 hours. Whereas when you're doing gesture drawing, you can learn how to do it every 30 seconds. So you're constantly learning, you're constantly practicing, and you're ensuring that you are getting those innate abilities to just see motion and rhythm in the body and put it on the page. So by doing this so quickly, as opposed to drawing full portraits, we're really ensuring that we're becoming much more quick and proficient at our skill. So now that we're aware of what gesture drawing is and why we want to use it, let's break it down and use it practically. So I'm going to bring up here a picture of the statue of David carved by Michelangelo, and we're going to apply a gesture drawing to it. Now I've linked it in the description, so you can pull it up and draw along with me, or you can simply watch. So I'm going to break this down into 12 easy steps. Now these are what I call my rules. However, in art, I really feel that rules are meant to be broken. So I implore you to try these, but if something's not working for you, if you want to do something a little bit differently, please feel welcome to. There isn't really a right or wrong way to do this. These are just guides to kind of help you along the way. Step 1. On our paper, it's best to define both the top and the bottom areas of where you want your gesture to be. This can be very simple, and it's just a line. It doesn't have to be straight, it doesn't have to be drawn well. This is just to give us a basic indication of where on the paper we want our figure to be. This will also give you the opportunity to put in a middle mark, which can also really help you later on just assigning lengths of varying things and kind of splitting the body into different proportions. For step 2, now that we have our initial top and our bottom planned out, before we even apply a line, we have to know what kind of lines to use and why to use them. So there are a lot of different lines to use, some of which include an S curve, a C curve, some people use an I, a V. We all use different shapes and kind of letters associated with them, but let's break it down into something that's very simple. So a C curve, it's very free-flowing. There isn't a lot of tension in it. And so it's something that you can use to show the movement of something without really adding a lot of tension or saying that the subject, again, has a lot of tension in that area. Whereas when you use an S curve, there's a lot more movement and there's a lot more bending within the action area. And this is going to assign a little bit more tension to that area. Then, when you have someone with a bent arm, much like Michelangelo's, that's something that has a lot of tension on it. And so we're actually going to want to use a V curve here. Now, different people use a more rough S curve. There isn't really a right or a wrong way to do this. It's all about preference, but I like to use a V curve to really allocate a lot of tension to that area. This is really important when we're shading later on and showing that tension throughout the body. Step number 3. Now that we know where the top and bottom of our gesture is, and what kind of lines we want to use in our gesture, we need to figure out where our initial line on that gesture is going to be made. Now, a lot of people generally think of starting to do your drawing on the head or on the feet of a drawing. However, with gesture, a lot of people really advocate the idea of starting at the spine, as that can really be one of the defining areas of movement throughout the body. Now, I'm not saying starting at the head is wrong or starting at the spine. Different people do different things. In my tutorial, I'm going to start at the spine, but please feel free to do whatever you want. However, I implore you to try both of them and then focus on whatever one you find harder. That way you can grow and become great at both. Step number 4, we are going to begin looking for the longest line in the body. This is generally referred to as our action line. And we're just looking for a line that goes through maybe an arm into the body, into a leg, or maybe it's much more simple, like in this case, it's more of moving through the body down the spine and into one leg. Sometimes it involves an arm or two. It differs between the subject. However, this line is going to show you how the body moves in general and where the weight is being placed. Step number 5. Now that we know where the top and bottom of our gesture is going to be, what line we want to use, and where we want to start, now we need to begin practicing making that first line. And I know what you're thinking. We're 5 steps in and we haven't even put a line on the page. And I know that it's taking a little bit of time in the tutorial. However, very soon you'll be doing it as second nature and it won't take more than 3 seconds in real life. So with all of that being said, we need to practice doing our initial line. So in the air, above our drawing, we're just going to move our pencil along the line of where we think we want to plot it initially. So why are we doing this? Why are we taking time out to imagine plotting a line as opposed to actually drawing it? And the idea is, generally when you draw a line for the first time, it isn't plotted correctly, it doesn't have the right movement, and you're going to go back and erase it. And going back and erasing and redrawing and erasing and redrawing 5 times takes so much more time than drawing it in the air 5 times over your page. So we're just getting in a habit of working much more quickly using other tools other than our eraser. So here we're just practicing that line until we finally make that commitment and we make one large bold stroke as our main action line throughout our piece. Now the 6th rule is again about that first line. I know, we're still on the first line. You thought you made it, you thought we were moving on, we're not, and I'm sorry. But about that first line, you've seen where we plotted it. We plotted it right down the middle. We're not doing a contour, we're not working around the body. Instead, we are going right through it. We'll be going right through the arms, right through the legs, and sometimes, even in this case, we're not even going through a body part. We're going through and around other body parts because we're just trying to get the general shape of what's going on, and we're not actually worrying about drawing the body and the anatomy yet. That comes later. For our 7th rule, we're actually going to look again at that line and ensure that it's not straight in any way. Now, in gesture drawing, you really don't ever want to use a straight line. You really want to have something that implies a lot of movement, and generally when we look at things, we think, oh, that arm, that's straight. And David's arm here, it's a great example because initially upon looking at it, you might think, oh, that's fairly straight. But when you really break it down here, you see that there's a lot of intricacies. There's a lot of little subtle movements within it. And that's really what breaks a gesture drawing away from a stick figure. A stick figure, it's stagnant, it's stale, nothing's going on, and it doesn't give us much about the action or motion of our character. A gesture drawing, however, really accentuates all of that, and through these very subtle, meticulous details and bends, you can learn so much about the character. Now, when we were beginning and we made that initial stroke, I said that we were making one very long, bold stroke. And that's because generally when we begin drawing, we do so hesitantly, and we'll kind of work our way around varying parts of the body in a myriad of miniature strokes. And this can be great when you're working on detail later on. However, when you're implying the movement, this can look very stiff, very mathematical, and it can really take a lot of the rhythm and motion out of your piece. So you really want to ensure that in the gesture drawing, All of these lines are made with confidence, they are long, they are strong, and you're just ensuring that they're not really broken up, that there is a consistent flow and movement within all of these lines. Number 9, exaggerating the pose. Now, this is incredibly important. As we were talking about stick figures being very stiff and not telling us much, that really indicates that when we draw these figures, when we draw these gestures, they need to have a lot of motion, a lot of movement, and they really need to tell us what's going on. So with that in mind, generally we need to exaggerate everything that we're doing. If we're making a C shape, really bring it out a lot. If you're making an S shape, give it a little bit of extra motion. And the whole idea here is we are ensuring that we remember that there's a lot of extremity in what we are rendering. If perhaps you do a little bit too much, that's fine, because later on, in we're adding our detail and our anatomy, we can tailor it down. But it's best to overdo in this area than to underdo. You don't want it to be stiff. You don't want it to be stagnant. You want it to have action and movement. You want it to have a rhythm to it. And that is done, generally, through exaggeration and extremity. Our 10th rule is about breaking down the drawing and doing it in such a way that you're creating as minimal lines as possible. You want to simplify this to the point where you can draw it in 5-10 seconds. You want to ensure that you get all of the information you need within as few lines as possible. Yes, you could draw the arm in 15 lines, or you could do it in 2. And 2 should be able to tell you enough to render those 15 later with the intricacy and detail as if you were looking at the subject even then. So it's a way of recording information in as few lines as possible so that later on you can add as much as needed. Next, we're going to look for our shoulder and our hip movements. Now, these are imperative in the drawing. I like to do these right after my main action line, and they show us both where the arms are going to be and where the legs are going to be. So it's really responsible for the majority of the limbs within your piece, and it's a very easy way to begin to plot where everything is. It's also important to note that they are very rarely ever flat on the body. You have them lifting up to one side or down to the other. The hips are the same way, and it adds a lot of dynamic energy to your painting or your drawing. Now it's time for our final step, and that is step number 12. Now, this is when you have a little bit of extra time. Perhaps this isn't a 5-second drawing. Perhaps you have 30 seconds, and you want to add a little bit more just to help yourself understand later on. What I'd like to begin with is working on the body. And this is just an egg shape. It's going to connect the top of the neck down to about the rib section. This will also connect to both of the sides of the shoulders. This is very simple, but it's going to give the drawing, it's going to make a lot more sense when you look at it. It's just going to solidify things. The second area I'd work on is around the groin area. This is just going to be a simple bowl shape, and it's going to show us whether the body is facing forward or backwards. It's also just going to help us plot where everything needs to go. From there, we can just add simpler circles to varying joints. This can be the shoulder, the elbow, the knees, anything you really need to add. But upon adding all of these things, your gesture drawing should be done. It should be finished, and it should look very good. It should definitely give you an indication of what you need to add later on. And initially, this might not be the easiest thing. These are a lot of rules. However, again, if you do this 10 times, you'll have a fairly good understanding of it, and this will very quickly become second nature. And there we have it, our completed gesture drawing. Now, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section down below. I'd be more than happy to get to them and help you in any way that I can. Now, that being said, if you've enjoyed this, if you found that you've learned something, please consider hitting that like button, that subscribe button. Every little thing you do here, it matters, it counts, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So with all of that being said, if you do decide to hit that subscribe button, I want you to know that every week from now on, I think on Wednesdays, I'll be uploading a gesture drawing video where we will practice together trying to draw 5 or 6 different subjects. It'll be something that we can ensure we are constantly practicing, getting better, and just ensuring that all of these skills that we learned here today, we are reinforcing them, we're not forgetting them, and we are ensuring that we are adding and building with them. So with all of that being said, if you want to keep up with everything that I'm doing, you can check out my newsletter. There's a link in the description. And upon signing up for that, you can also receive a free real-time painting video of how to do a winter cardinal. So with all of that being said, again, I thank you for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section down below, and I will see you in the next video.